Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inside Archaeology, where we dig into the study of human history through our artifacts, monuments, and remains. Today, I'm very happy to bring you another Ask an Archaeologist video. Our guest is J.T. Lewis, a PhD candidate at the University of Oklahoma who came to archaeology later in life after first working for the railroad. His research is focused on late Archaic and early woodland period hunter gatherer societies in America. He specializes in lithic analysis and landscape approaches that look at exchange, mobility, and other social systems amongst these groups. As someone who is Creole and came from a low income, blue collar family, he spends a lot of his time engaging with Indigenous groups and working to improve accessibility in archaeology for everyone, especially those with similar backgrounds to himself who might not otherwise think that archaeology is something that they can necessarily do. In our interview, we speak about his research, his accessibility work, and how he went from the railroad to studying archaeology. Before we begin, don't forget to take a few seconds to subscribe or like to help support the channel and show the algorithm that people are interested in the stories of real archaeologists. If you want to take it further and actively support Inside Archaeology in all that we do, all super thanks, Ko-fi donations, and profits from our merchandise on Redbubble go back into improving and promoting the channel. You can find links to basically all of these in the description of this video. Without further ado, let's dig in. So, welcome to the channel, JT. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
I'm always eager to speak to more people about their careers in archaeology, and especially interesting because, as you said, you come to it a little bit later in life, which I think is something that a lot of people consider because they
Hmm.
didn't think that being an archaeologist was an option when they were small. And then later they're like, oh, this is something I could actually do, but how would I do it? So I think you're going to be a really great example today for people who are maybe considering a career change. We'll jump right into our first question, which is, as somebody who came to archaeology later in life, as opposed to, going right out of high school into university and then working as an archaeologist, how did you come across archaeology and start working in it?
I was actually working for the railroad for a while, and then I was laid off. And once I was laid off, I decided part of my severance package was to look for employment or go back to school. So I decided to go back to school to finish my bachelor's. And along the way, I took an introduction to archaeology class just for fun. A friend of mine was taking it, I decided to take it, and I had always had an interest in it, but I never really thought about it as a career path. And when I took that class, my the university as I had a big focus in actually in CRM, and so they kind of opened my eyes to the different possibilities of working as an archaeologist. And so I really got into the field and the thought process about it and things like that. And I've always kind of had an interest in the past, but also kind of really enjoyed mysteries and things like that. So I really combined those two to find this, you know, I think I'm doing well at least in this life in archaeology and things like that.
That's a lot of the similar things that I think I personally enjoy about archaeology as well. The solving a puzzle is always something I've really enjoyed doing. Um, as somebody who worked in rail, have you, and in a more, which is, obviously a much more like a manual labor job, I'm assuming, have you found any crossover in your skills from what you did previously?
Being able to already be kind of used to working a physical labor job has helped, especially in CRM in North America. You have usually shovel test and every 30 meters. So I was already used to that as well. But every occasionally there are projects that actually involve rail, and so having a familiarity with not only the equipment and things like that, but also the how rail is built has been really beneficial to me in some cases. So there's definitely some crossover, and I think that's kind of the great thing about archaeology is that it's very interdisciplinary, and so having all these different life skills always really seem to come into play in archaeology in one way or the other.
I think one of the phrases people often use to describe us is jack of all trades. Because I feel like you really do have a little bit of everything involved in archaeology. So you mentioned working in CRM, and then in the notes you sent me, you mentioned that you've also worked for a state agency, which is like the local authority that are the people that look after and settle the rules for what you can and cannot do with archaeology. What's the similarities and differences between those kind of two career paths as an archaeologist?
CRM, my experience has mostly just been as a field tech. I've done a few crew chiefs, so just slightly above field tech. And in a for the states, I've mostly worked in either developing some type of system that was used long term or contract based to fix particular issues. So with the state agencies, you're dealing with a lot of not only like current situations or issues within it, but also I'll just be honest, there's a long history of bad archaeology in cases, and so you're trying to also fix those while staying within new and ever-changing archaeological guidelines, either it be state or federal, where
Hmm.
CRM, at least at like the field tech and crew chief level, you're really focused on that particular project. And once that project's gone, you go on to the next one, unless you're like report writing and things like that. So in the state and like government agencies, you're working on a lot more compliance and long-term compliance, where
Hmm.
CRM for me, it's been kind of, "Oh, I'm working on this project. Okay, well, I've finished being a shovel bum for that. I'm going on to the next project now."
Hmm. So you went back to school after your rail job and studied archaeology. Can you tell us what your kind of career path has been since then?
Yeah, so originally I had intended to when I went back to school to just get my degree and actually go back to the railroad. And then I've decided along the way that no, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I originally intended to just get my master's degree and go into CRM. My family's always kind of been blue collar workforce and things like that. And actually I was third generation railroader when I was in it. But when I got into graduate school, I realized that accessibility was really important to me because not many people know they can get into it that are from non-traditional paths and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And I felt that the discipline could really benefit from having people from diverse backgrounds and things like that coming into the field. And so I decided that I would try to get into academia, which I know is a long shot, but it's been really beneficial since then because I've had various tribes and various other agencies or people from different backgrounds saying they're really interested in if I end up somewhere sending students to me because they've really been want someone that is really worried about accessibility from people from non-traditional backgrounds or just haven't had the most benefits in life. So I grew up,
Hmm.
I'm Creole, and then I grew up very impoverished. Along the way, I even had prior to me returning to school, had university professors tell me that grad school wasn't for me.
Hmm.
And so that kind of out of spite, I've tried to go as far as I can now, but I don't want other people to face it. I want people to realize that archaeology can be for anyone, and I really think that if I continue along this path, and I won't make a big change, but if it keeps moving forward, that archaeology will at least become more accessible, and then
Hmm.
that in turn will really benefit the field.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really admirable goal to have for your career. And certainly you've gone much farther than I have. And I come from one of these more traditional backgrounds that you talk about. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your PhD and what your thesis topic is?
Yes. So my kind of just to start off what my PhD research is, I have to go back just a little bit to my master's research. I was working on Poverty Point, a collection from Poverty Point, which is actually Mound A is the picture behind me from Poverty Point. And while I was working on that, I was really into lithic raw material identification. I wanted to really understand trade and things like that that were coming in. And something I noticed is there are geological outcroppings in kind of Arkansas and Oklahoma, which are kind of just northwest of Poverty Point, and but they none of that material was coming in. So for my PhD, I went to the University of Oklahoma, and there was a archaeological culture called Fushmaline, named after a nearby creek, and it had these very diverse and just high quality raw material that were not showing up at Poverty Point. And now that I've gotten more into my research and things like that, I've really been looking at aspects of trade, social interactions, and cultivation of early plants in the late Archaic to early woodland periods in North America.
You kind of have touched on it a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about why you decided to study this particular culture, or tell us a little bit more about it for people who don't know, like, the region, the time period, etc.?
Mhm. Yeah, so I focused most of my research in Southeast, primarily on hunter-gatherer populations. One of the reasons I kind of got interested in it is I do a lot of hunting and fishing myself, and kind of in my early days of reading archaeology, I read an older paper about uh, what it must have been like for hunter gatherers and the sexual division of labor. And I realized that it was really from someone who had not actually hunted and fished a lot. And so that I that made me want to focus a lot of my efforts on hunter gatherer research. The reason that I was really interested in Fushmaline culture was because we have these huge kind of interaction exchanges that are going on in Southeast during the late Archaic and early Woodland, and that's Poverty Point and Hopewell. But for some reason, the Fushmaline people seem to not be participating in that, and that really interested me. And their most of their materials are all local, including items that are usually would be some kind of exotic material made from some exotic material. They're instead just made from local material. So this either personal, exclusion, either where they're doing it to themselves or they're being forced upon them, really interested me because out of all of this and this great material, raw material that is here, they're not interacting in these big, giant, kind of sweeping changes, cultural changes that we see going on in the Southeast. And I'm really interested in why that is and how this impacted later aspects of indigenous history in the Southeast.
Yeah, that sounds really, really, really interesting, especially as you say, it's there's a lot of exchange, and then some people are just like, "Nah, I'm
Yeah.
good." Yeah, begs the
Yeah.
question as to why. Um, how far are you along in your PhD?
So I'm in my 4th year of my PhD, so
Okay.
hopefully around this time next year, I will be finished.
Well, we'll all keep our fingers crossed for
Yeah.
you. That's an excellent way to lead on to our next question, which is, what are your like career aspirations or prospects, and what do you want to do when you finish your PhD?
Yeah, so my hopeful goal is to end up in academia. I am not a kind of big city person. I am very country, backwoods, if however you want to say it. So I'm actually more interested in teaching colleges than I am like programs with like PhDs. I'm not really interested in teaching other PhDs and things like that. So I'm more focused on trying to find these smaller teaching colleges so that way I feel like I can be the most beneficial, not so much in, researching archaeology, but can help move the field forward by bringing more people in and bringing in different perspectives. And so that's really my ultimate goal. Of course, in North America and many other places around the world, getting into academia is very tough. So that's why I've spent a lot of my time also working in CRM and state level agencies so that I have this kind of well rounded experience to where if I don't end up in academia, I can still find other careers in archaeology.
Yeah, I think that's like you said, it's important to be well-rounded, but also I really resonate with you talking about bringing more people into archaeology and making it accessible, because I'm sure you're probably aware that's one of the reasons why I started the YouTube channel, is because I felt like it is very niche. It's one of
Mhm,
those things where if you stumble across it, sometimes it seems like by accident. It's not something that's very well known about by the general public, and also struggles to present itself on non-traditional media.
mhm,
That's not a bunch of
yeah.
textbooks. You wrote to me about how, you're really passionate, like you as is very clear from the interview so far, about improving accessibility and I guess also I would say like public knowledge of archaeology. So what kind of work have you been doing or do you do to do that already?
I work with avocational societies, and this can include personal kind of communications or presenting information or even sometimes working with them on excavating sites and things like that, getting the general public in there and to see what kind of archaeology is really like because, in the media, it's not always projected as kind of what we're doing. I've attempted to make a YouTube channel, but while trying to do that while getting my PhD, I'm not very active on it. Um,
Yeah.
I'm usually pretty active on social media, just trying to answer questions. Also on different aspects of archaeological communities that focus on student outreach. So different things like that to hopefully kind of mentor younger students that are coming into archaeology or interested in a field of archaeology that can really get them in. And then I also do several volunteer exercises. So I'm a traditional flint knapper. Several of the tribes will get me to do flint knapping demonstrations, or in some cases, attain particular materials or things like that that are incorporated into indigenous practices and things like that. And then so I'll do those and I'll do demonstrations and things like that to get really people interested in it, like seeing what's going on and then using that to connect to how we can research these things in the past through
Mhm.
archaeology.
Yeah, that's a really interesting mix of what we call community archaeology in the UK and then experimental archaeology, which is great because I actually just interviewed a experimental archaeologist who was talking about all that kind of stuff. Is there a lot of like public or community archaeology stuff in the US?
Yes, so actually in Oklahoma, there's we call it Oak Pan. It's the Oklahoma Public.
Archaeology Network?
Yes, that's it. But it's really focused on the community and working with indigenous tribes. So, for those not in the United States, Oklahoma is the location that all the indigenous tribes were, or well, not all, but a lot of the indigenous people were removed to. And so, in Oklahoma, we actually have around 39 federally recognized tribes, which is more than any other state. And so, OPAN works towards incorporating that and just the general community into these different practices and things like that. So we have things like a 4-hour field school. So we just bring people in and teach them the methods real quick and kind of use those to get people more involved in the process and things like that. And so there's a lot of different activities, everything from like lecture series to hands-on experience to demonstrations and things like that that really go in Oklahoma. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I decided to come to Oklahoma for my PhD.
Mm. All right. Well, that's kind of the end of our like longer form section of the interview. These are my kind of like short fire round questions that are coming up next. What is your best and worst field experience?
So my best field experience was we were working on a bioarchaeological survey, and there was an individual in Biloxi who was being relocated from his initial burial to a new burial location. And the university I was with was tasked with moving this individual, and he's well known in the area because he was at one point a pirate who sold out other pirates to get an island from the Spanish government. And it was really interesting when we were removing because he had various things that were kind of entombed with him, which are including dolphin bones. And I thought just that was really an interesting, and we don't know if it was accidental or on purpose, but there were dolphin remains incorporated or at least found with um, in his burial and things like that. And that was just really cool. And just to be working with someone that I knew the history of, and he's a well-known person, at least in the area and things like that, was just really kind of a cool experience. As far as my worst experience, I was doing a CRM project on a military base, and the PI got the maps confused, and we were excavating in a area of a military base that we were not supposed to be.
Ooh.
So that was an interesting day, but that was probably my worst field experience.
Yeah, I can imagine that was not pleasant.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing that you've discovered or found while doing fieldwork?
This is actually a kind of a funny thing. I focus on lithics and everything like that. Since I have gotten into professional archaeology, I have yet to find a projectile point. Have never on no project on even larger sites and things like that. Have never. It has always not been me. Um, the probably the one of the cool coolest things that I found, there was a base of a ceramic vessel that I had been looking into as part of my dissertation research, and kind of finding the thing that I was looking at was this base of this vessel, was just really cool, and once again kind of just made me kind of connect to these things. You see these things in these books and things like that that you're reading about, and then to actually find one and be the one that kind of takes it out of the ground is just a, for me at least, is just an amazing experience that I kind of wish a lot of people could could experience. There's been several times where I would be the one working in a unit and I'd stop, and then like 2 minutes later, whoever took over after me would come into there and be like, "Oh, look what I found!" And there was
The archaeology gods are just taunting you.
yes, there was one time we were doing a pedestrian survey, and so we have a couple of meters between each person, and I was walking my transect and didn't find anything, and then the person directly beside me found 7 projectile points while walking, and
Oh,
I was just like, "Cool." So now
that's
it's kind of
harsh.
this running gag that I will never find one, even though this is kind of my specialty focus is on stone tools.
I suppose that answers the next question I have, though, which is if you could choose, what artifact would you like to find?
Yes, I would very much like to find a projectile point of any kind. It didn't just at some point, and even in it could be broken, full, anything. I would just like to find one now.
Yeah, well, I'll keep my fingers crossed for you that that you'll come across it in future. Our second last question is, what would you say to encourage or inspire other people to follow in your footsteps?
My big thing would be just to take that chance. I never really saw my life as becoming an archaeologist. I always thought I'd be a railroader, like I said. I was third generation railroader when I got into it, and so I always thought that I was going to just be a railroader, and then I just decided to take that chance, and it has dramatically changed my life. I decided that I really wanted to be an archaeologist, and I have met and done amazing things since then. I was very fearful because I was a non-traditional student. I was older. Most of the other students in my classes and things like that were anywhere from 6 to 10 years younger than I was, and so it was really kind of nerve-wracking to decide if I wanted to take that, but once I did, it's been just absolutely, amazing since then.
Never look back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. Last but not least, you've mentioned your YouTube channel and being active on social media. So, where can people follow you on all the various platforms?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, and you can find me, it's JT Lewis_ARC, ARCE, and you can find me on there.
That's everything for today. Thank you so much for taking some time to speak to myself and everyone else on the channel. And I look forward to yeah, continuing to engage and seeing what you're able to do in the future.
Thank you, and I really just wanna say I really appreciate what you do with this channel and everything like that,
Oh,
and
thanks.
so I think it's really beneficial to have these perspectives for people who are really interested in the field and things like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much. That really means a lot.
Okay, everyone, that's everything for today. What part of the interview did you like the most? You can follow JT and his journey on Twitter or YouTube. Links to both of his accounts are in the description. Don't forget to comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel before you leave if you like what we do here. If you're feeling extra generous, you can go to my Ko-fi page and support Inside Archaeology with a small donation. Or if you want a more tangible return, you can visit my Redbubble store and pick your favorite archaeology slogan to adorn a hat, t shirt, mug, button, or whatever else takes your fancy. Just a few seconds of your time spent supporting me in any way that you can helps grow the channel and promotes quality heritage content that is well sourced, researched, and presented by somebody who is an expert in this subject and knows what they're talking about. It shows the algorithm that people are interested in real archaeology, not pseudoscience or conspiracy theories. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure into the world of archaeology.